Because we talk about here at Keen the 3 C's. So it's the cost of data and organizing that data to be able to make it useful. There's the complexity of all those data sources that you're talking about that may be telling very different stories, which then leads to the 3rd C, which is conflict. And if you have...
I think a lot of marketers, when I talk to them, we're all in the same boat, which is how do I find the new model? And what does that look like? And the little secret that I think I've come to, or
talk a lot at Keen about, and one of our values is grow or die, right? So it's, how do we continue to learn and evolve based on how the marketplace is evolving? And that allows us to help our clients win. So if we're ahead of the market, we can help drag our marketing partners along with us.
To whether it's a marketing leader or business leader or founders, always be thinking about what fuses do I need to start lighting today, because building the capability set for what that next thing is kind of something that has to be learned and acquired as you go forward.
Welcome to our first ever episode of ReveNew. It's a really important series where we're going to be talking to marketing leaders about the challenges and opportunities they're seeing in the marketplace, talk through how to harness data and analytics and technology to make better decisions, and also really highlight the lessons learned that folks are feeling in the trenches. So I wanted to welcome, and I have the pleasure of welcoming Andy Judd, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Laird Superfoods, previously CMO at Yasso. Great partnership with Andy over the years. And I'm Greg Dolan, your host, CEO and co-founder at Keen Decision Systems. Welcome, Andy.
Hi, Greg. Great to see you again, as always. And love the chance to talk shop and kind of find ways to always sharpen my skills as well. So it'll be a good discussion.
Yeah, so I want to just start out, Andy, and talk through some of the challenges that marketers are facing today, based on your experience. What are you facing every day? What's happening in the trenches, and what are you finding to be the best practices?
Yeah, I mean, in today's landscape, I don't even know where to start. There's so many different fronts that you're working against. Obviously there's organizational fronts and the challenges right now from an HRP perspective that we're all dealing with, and how to keep our people motivated, and how do we deal with the Great Recession, and how do we build infrastructure and teams that are fluid and flexible, right? So there's that front. There's the dynamic front of the macro consumer environment. And then there's the infrastructure and go-to-market piece that I think will be the most relevant to this conversation, which is, what does my go-to-market model need to look like in today's landscape? And I don't know that, honestly, there's great equilibrium out there. And I say that kind of in this post-COVID reality that we live in, post-iOS reality that, I think a lot of marketers, when I talk to them, we're all in the same boat, which is, how do I find the new model? And what does that look like? And the little secret that I think I've come to, or maybe I'm compartmentalizing and rationalizing, is like, there is no answer yet. And I think it's incumbent on most marketers to maintain a really fluid approach to how they think about their mix. And I don't think that's going to change. I think we're going to be in fluid state for some time.
I'm seeing the same thing. And if I think back 20 years in marketing, it seems like it was pretty easy 20 years ago, right? We had a couple traditional channels at TV, yes, radio, print.
How do I decide between those? FSIs, you got to get your distribution list right on an FSI.
Coupon the heck out of the consumer.
Exactly.
And now we're seeing, we've seen increased complexity over the last 20 years. Digital channels coming to fruition, more channel fragmentation and complexity. But to your point, the last 2 years or the last 3 years with COVID and that impact has made it even more complex and fragmented and difficult in a lot of changing landscapes in terms of not only the channels, but also distribution channels and how to reach consumers. So it obviously is going to create the need for a different skill set. So what are you looking for in terms of building your team that you may not have been looking for 5 years ago?
Yeah, I think there's some soft skills and then there's some hard skills that have to be kind of paramount as I look at recruiting and structure. So I'll talk a little bit about, I'll kind of go down that strategy, structure, staffing path and kind of land to the skill set. So from a strategy perspective, as I said, fluidity and the ability to adapt are really important. And so creating a structure that matches both the technical expertise, just like you said, given the fragmentation of what we're seeing and all the different platforms, making sure that you have technicians that have a good baseline understanding of platforms. And most things are written under a baseline of Google or Facebook Meta at this point, and they're iterations thereof. So having people that really understand the technical mechanics, I think is crucial. And that can't be abdicated to external partners. That's not to suggest that you shouldn't still have external partners. That just means that you got to absorb some of that technical skill set. So it's, hey, how flexible can I be? And then can I make sure I have technical capabilities in-house that can run to new platforms as they exist. From a hard skills, incrementally, from a hard skills perspective, analytic skills and capabilities have never been more necessary in marketing, right? I think, don't get me wrong, the ability to create a great narrative and produce great contextually relevant content is definitely a big part of that. But that context is really analytically derived. And so it's not only how am I analytically building content, but also analytically, how am I optimizing my mix? And so I think the age of the mathematician marketer is upon us. And I think when you hear a lot of the great brands that are working really well, they've maximized that capability, which is I'm placing the best content that's native to this platform, and I'm building it against a campaign architecture that is mathematically optimized or analytically optimized.
So how do you do that given the fluidity, right? So it's obviously really difficult. What you're talking about, I love the term mathematical marketer because that's exactly what we see as well, that there's a algorithmic complexity to what decisions marketers need to make. And to your point, getting contextually relevant content to the consumer in the right channel at the right time when you have, an emerging list of potential outlets to be able to deliver that content is pretty incredible. And it's very difficult to do without math, right? So can you talk through a little bit around how you're leveraging technology and marrying that up with the analytical human resources that you're putting into play on your team as well?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here. So one is it's really important to set up your, as important as organizational structure is, analytical structure is almost equally as important at this point, right? Having clean visibility to the business, is worth the dollars in investment to do it, right? And I think you're seeing this like emergence of a non-working to working environment, and you have to think more holistically. It's not just within the marketing budget anymore. You got to think about that relative to the SG&A side of things too, which is how do I bring in human capital, the right digital and analytical infrastructure, and how I then activate that. And so a couple of things to think about in that. One, it is about the recruit. You got to think about how you recruit that, and that means kind of rewriting for what those right capabilities are. And just having a few years of marketing is no longer prerequisite, but thinking about where you're finding them, right? Don't go straight to, this person's got a couple of years at a blue chip CPG or a couple of years in an emerging brand. They need to have some mathematical training, dashboard level training, media, performance marketing level training. So I think there's a different experience set, that comes with that. And then from a kind of operationally speaking, the dashboarding side of things and the platform side of things is a challenge. I think that's, going in eyes wide open that there is no single source of truth is a really important mindset. And you need to build a dashboard / platform view that can give you a couple of pieces of information. It's triangulation at its best, but it's kind of like, we're getting into like a geometry class here, right? So I was about to make a reference
Putting the pieces together.
Yeah, it's like a hexagon. Yeah. It's like a hexagon versus a triangulation. You're putting a lot of pieces of the puzzle together, and you kind of that's a cultural mindset as much as anything, which is I see what's happening over here on this dashboard, and then I've got this third party piece over here, and here's what Google Analytics is saying, and here's what my my Facebook campaign manager is saying. Here's what AdWords looks like, and here's what Amazon, and you're kind of like putting those components together. And that's why I go back to that notion of like marketers today cannot abdicate that externally. They just can't. You have to be able to have that skill inside to be able to shepherd and lead that, business, because your partners, unless you're in a holistic place and one partner owns everything, which I've never seen, because there's that technical divide, and to your point, the kind of complexity of the models that we operate, that doesn't happen. So then it's incumbent upon the brand to be able to navigate that optimization across platforms in the marketplace. So important for the org, important for the recruit. That looks different. Important to set up the right digital infrastructure and dashboarding. And then this cultural mindset of like, there is not a single source of truth. It is 1,000 points of light. You've got to be able to put them all together to say, here's what I think is happening. And then keep moving forward.
Well, it really makes it more difficult to make decisions based on that as well, because we talk about here at Keen the 3 C's. So it's the cost of data and organizing that data to be able to make it useful. There's the complexity of all those data sources that you're talking about that may be telling very different stories, which then leads to the 3rd C, which is conflict. And if you have data at different levels telling a different story, being able to pull those together in some kind of system, put them on the same playing field to be able to make sense of it is really important, because you may have data at the person level for digital channels, but then you have, sponsorship impressions that you may have to marry up with that to really understand how to pull it all together. And I think that's where technology comes into play, and in particular the technology that we have here at Keen to be able to put all that potentially conflicting pieces of information on the same playing field in service of that next decision that could be predictive and prescriptive.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not even just the having the right partner like Keen, as you mentioned, to be able to say, hey, I've got a lot of different components of my mix. Some of them are under different KPIs, and how do I get a truly comparative set against that, and how do I then build a richer environment to evaluate that vitally important. And that goes back to there's no single source of truth, but you need to have a kind of ombudsman in the set that's unbiased, unfiltered, no conflict in the decision, and with a capability to try and in their best capability evaluate apples and oranges. And I think that's what you're keying on that for sure.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like, we both have big CPG backgrounds and have taken different paths, and you've had a ton of success in the emerging brand landscape. And not to put words in your mouth, but knowing your history, I know that you've leveraged analytics and changing the approach or the model to leverage that in an innovative way as a competitive advantage, right? So could you talk a little bit about the competitive advantage that a brand like Laird Superfoods has relative to the big guys, how you're leveraging data and digital infrastructure and technology for that competitive advantage, but also talk about what emerging brands need to avoid going forward?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, look, the reason I've come to really love this space is because of its natural precondition to forward momentum and evolution. Right. And some of that is not that larger brands don't have the desire or even the capability to do that. I just don't have the history to unwind in order to move in that direction. I mean, you and I grew up in very similar backgrounds, which is, it's a triangle and it's center led from a general management, brand management component, and it's heavy strategy, and it's meant to do a few things really well. And as the model has moved to this fragmented doing, a lot of different things, but being able to create kind of a living organism go to market, if you will, that's really hard to turn a multi-thousand person organization around, particularly when, the customer set's always changing from that. And the consumer is evolving, and the media marketplace is always evolving. It's just a hard landscape to navigate. And I think what I found in this space is creating a system that takes all of that great training and foundational components of brand strategy and rich analytics, and then applying that more to the go-to-market versus the reflection of what the business is doing, right? So I look back extremely fondly. I was very fortunate to start my career at the Campbell Soup Company, and what I think is just one of the best run organizations out there, and has done some great stuff recently if you look at what they're doing in the omni-channel space. But the thing that I've taken away from that is like just kind of like muscle memory of analytics and math, brand strategy, and now how do I apply that to the market rather than just to the brand and, hey, here's what the business did in the past. And I think that's where, combined with obviously they're native to a new world, they're not native to a retail centered dynamic is a big component of it.
Agreed. I love forward momentum as a term, because I believe that given the need to be agile and fluid, to use your words, especially given where the market is and what's emerging on almost a daily basis, you have to be able to make that pivot, right? And the folks that at the bigger companies that are going to be successful into the future are the ones that are going to be able to follow your lead, the emerging brand lead, to be able to react very quickly. And even be proactive in a world that's changing every day.
Yeah, so. And I'll give context to that. Let me just paint a picture of the last 10 days of marketing work that we've done here at Laird. We rewrote all the video content, shot, produced, and put on air. We redid our Amazon DSP approach. We opened up and started testing some new Spotify podcast work. And simultaneously, we're having development conversations about how do we look at new merchandising approaches in store, right? That's a 10-day window. And so there's this kind of natural, there's this always building, always churning. It can be grind. I don't think it's all sunshine and rainbows by any means. Like, oh, we're emerging brands and look how great everything is. Like, no, it can be grinding on a culture too. When if you don't build a culture right, you never feel solid and you never feel grounded too. And sometimes that's a challenge for leaders too.
So just to build on that, so you're talking about some of the traps potentially that marketers can fall into. What else are you seeing in terms of, hey, don't go down that path. That's going to lead to a dead end, and things to avoid? Yeah,
I think, obviously a lot of brands in this space are resource constrained, whether that's dollars constrained or human, FTE constrained. And what they'll do is they'll try and kind of like push all chips into a certain place. More times than not, what you'll see is like, brands early in their life stage be all in on a DTC model, and they don't start working on incremental vectors of growth soon enough, right? And kind of, so I would say to whether it's a marketing leader or business leader or founders, always be thinking about what fuses do I need to start lighting today, because building the capability set for what that next thing is is kind of something that has to be learned and acquired as you go forward. Whether that's, hey, I'm maximizing the outreach, whether that's a piece of mix, or whether that's, hey, I need to get to a new third party or selling platform, or whether that's, I really need to rethink my fulfillment structure, because today, yeah, I can fulfill this angle, but in order to get from a DTC to an FBA to a target direct fulfillment, like that's all different models. And am I working that? It's also IT and marketing have never been more intertwined than they are today. So making sure that like you think about what that resource pool is. I think that's why you're starting to see this trend of, I'm not saying consolidation, but integration of functions, i.e. the move from CMO to chief growth officer, chief commercial officer, and having that person that understands both the business strategy, the brand, as well as the mechanical and technical side of how to go to market today. So I think the trap really is not bringing those functional components together. And a lot of brands like feel great growth when they start a vector because they're small and they're early, and then they hit some decay rates in that growth curve, and they haven't started new things early enough.
I love that. It's constantly thinking about the future and being able to simulate those environments for avenues of growth, but also recognizing that the budgets aren't going to be exponentially higher as well, right? So how do so if we're going to start direct to consumer and we're going to optimize against that model, if we're going to add retail or we're going to add another kind of go-to-market model or launch innovation, we have to be thinking about how to utilize those resources in the best way to be able to enable those opportunities. And I think, bringing it back to Keen for a second, that's what we do, right? So to be able to take all that information, we'll start with you in DTC. How do we optimize within that channel, within that distribution channel, to make sure you're getting the most resources best use of your resources possible? And then let's simulate, hey, if we want to enter retail, what does that look like? What kind of resources would be necessary? How do we think about potentially driving more efficiency in DTC so that can enable an entrance into brick and mortar? How do we launch innovation in a way that's going to be additive and complementary and also provide halo back to the base brand? All of those things could be simulated in technology in service of that decision to make sure you're constantly utilizing your resources in the most efficient, effective way.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add on the thing I love about the Keen system is the multi-model approach. Back to my commentary on that there's no single source of truth, right? One of the biggest challenges I think for a lot of marketers, particularly in this space, is as decay rate sets in, they immediately start to focus their energy down funnel. Because what's happening is like their growth starts to slow, and then fear forces them into a situation where gravity pulls them to, I need the things that are most tangible to offset that decay rate to get it accelerated, rather than the recognition that like, a balanced funnel is always the best, In fact, I would say for emerging brands, an unbalanced funnel up would even be better than a downward facing funnel approach because of where they are in their overall the curve of the life of the brand. So I think one of the things that I've appreciated in our partnership in the past is that I can run multiple models to understand both optimization within channel, but holistically, and start to really get a better feel for halo and turning, playing whack-a-mole, right? Which is like, well, let's take COVID as a great example, which is like, events are out, great, turn it off. Where does the money run to from there? I don't want to spend more on retail shopper marketing. Great, turn that off. Oh, I need to double down on Kroger. Where am I pulling dollars for? So I think it's having the ability to, hey, I can look at my total business, I can look at my DTC business, I can look at my Amazon business, and then I can look at the mix across all of them to really get a fluid view of how the mix is operating in order to make better decisions.
Love it. And keep it live as information continues.
100%.
New information can be brought in, and you keep, you update the models and that gives you another perspective to make the next decision. And,
absolutely. And keep the variables live, even with even within the periodic sense that you're talking about. But one of the examples that I there's like, we were seeing things like PR being overvalued, honestly, and within the model. Well, then it's like you do a little bit of analytical digging. It's like, honestly, it's probably because of the weight we're putting against a different variable, and we needed to rethink the input into the model in order to get a cleaner view. Because, in any regression orientation, if you put something in, it's going to want to place attribution to it. And so I think it's also, that's why I say mathematical marketing is so important, because having an understanding of how regression-based modeling works can help you view what the output looks like in order to make the right decisions and continue to optimize. It's living, never stopping. I always tell people, like, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I never stop learning, and I never stop hustling. And I think that's got to be the mindset. That's
fluidity, agility, a learning model. We talk a lot at Keen about, and one of our values is grow or die, right? So it's how do we continue to learn and evolve based on how the marketplace is evolving, and that allows us to help our clients win. So if we're ahead of the market, we can help drag our marketing partners along with us.
Absolutely, yeah. I think Laird's, one of his go-tos, if you're not evolving, you're devolving, and kind of just, for him, that's both physically and mentally, and in the business context as well.
Awesome. Well, Andy, this has been a phenomenal discussion. It's always good to catch up with you.
Always.
Congratulations on all your success. We really value our partnership with you in particular, and look forward to more conversations like this.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. Always.